Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. I'm Paul Stevens, editor of Short-Term Rentals, and welcome to this Rockstars 3.0 webinar on the professionalisation of software, and it's sponsored by Flywire and PointCentral. It's me, Paul Stevens. And before we kick things off, I'd like to bring in Nick Rocco from our Rockstars 3.0 series sponsor, Flywire, who's going to introduce his company. So Nick, delighted to have you joining us today.
Hey, Paul. Yeah, thanks so much again for having me back. I need to give you a more updated picture. That's from my old Marriott days, and I don't wear suits anymore, which I'm very happy about. No, thank you so much for having me. Great to be back and look forward to listening in. For those of you who don't know, Flywire is an international payments company, and we help simplify some of life's most important payments. Whether you're a combination provider, destination management company, or any other business in the travel industry, we like to take away some of the pain points that come around making payments cross-currency, as that we want that to be the least of your worries when traveling abroad. So good to be here with you all. If you have any other questions about who we work with and how we can be of benefit, you have my contact details here, and hope you guys are all doing well.
Thank you very much, Nick, and delighted to have you and Flywire on board for our Rockstars webinar series. Thank you. So in terms of webinar guidelines for today, please keep your sound on mute and your camera off if you're not speaking. I'm being ably assisted by my colleagues Justin and Floor today. All of the details are in the chat. Please also do post any questions you have there as well throughout the session, and a recording will also be sent round to everyone after today's session. So let me introduce our Rockstars lineup for today, and we're going to start with Jim from our session sponsor, PointCentral. So Jim, do you want to introduce your company and yourself?
Paul, thank you very much. Yes, I'm the Director of Sales with PointCentral, and I appreciate you inviting me here today as well. PointCentral is a subsidiary of Alarm.com. Alarm.com is a $4 billion company traded on the Nasdaq. We are the world's largest smart home software company in the world. And PointCentral, a subsidiary of Alarm.com, we focus exclusively on the property management industry. And we focus on operating an enterprise level software smart home solution that focuses on helping property managers with operational efficiency, improving the guest experience, and protecting assets in those units. And again, Paul, thanks for inviting us here today. Thanks.
Well, thank you very much to you and to PointCentral for your support for this session. Thanks, Jim. And next up, we have Alex from Properly. So Alex, take it away.
Thanks very much for having me. Properly is a quality management platform, and we also support the training and learning for property managers and hosts. We've been a pioneer in the industry. We've been around since 2014. And today we very much focused on helping our host and property manager customers set the standard. We work mostly through distribution relationships with Booking.com, Vrbo on a global basis. And some of our customers also include some of the larger hotel chains around the world, including Marriott and Accor, who's also an investor. Thanks very much for having me.
Thank you very much, Alex. And next up, we have Kelsey from Breezeway. Kelsey, you're on mute. Not too sure where Kelsey is. I know she's definitely there, so we'll try and get back to her in due course. But we'll turn now to Marcus from Hostaway, and we'll try and get back to Kelsey.
Yeah, I just saw a notification that she left, so I guess she's coming back soon. Hi everyone, my name is Marcus. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Hostaway. We're a property management system and channel manager for vacation rental property managers. We're quite unique in the space because we partner exclusively with growing property managers. So unlike a lot of systems that are specialized in a certain area or a certain size of property managers, we actually choose very carefully who we partner with, and we only partner with the property managers that have growth plans. and everything we do in our company is built around that growth. And this year has been a fantastic year. I could also say that we launched our marketplace. We have been building it for 6 years. And as far as I've seen, we have the largest integrated software marketplace in the entire vacation rental industry. We currently have 110 partners, including Properly, including Breezeway, and we have about 40 to be integrated soon. So any property manager that outgrows one aspect of our system has more than 100 other systems, such as Properly and Breezeway, to choose from. And I'm based in Toronto, and I really like the name of the webinar. Rockstars is great. I also truly enjoy Metallica, and overall I like metal, but mostly death metal.
Thank you very much, Marcus. I'm sure we'll touch on that a bit later on as well. I can see Kelsey is back with us. So Kelsey, just introduce yourself, please.
Yes, sorry about that. My name is Kelsey Liversidge. I'm the client experience lead at Breezeway. Breezeway is a property care and operations software platform for coordinating, communicating, and verifying work and service with your properties. So we help clients manage the entire process of property service and care, every physical interaction with the property, to deliver a better experience to guests and owners. So really excited to be here today, and thank you, Paul.
Thank you very much, Kelsey. And so just to contextualize this conversation and just to give you a bit of a sense of what we're going to be talking about, we're going to be discussing some of the M&A activity recently that we've been seeing in the short-term rental software space. So in particular, Pareto buying VR Scheduler, Guesty acquiring MyVR and Your Porter. We're also going to be touching on Breezeway's property operations report, seeing as we've got Kelsey here today. Hostaway's integrations milestone, as Marcus alludes to, and our recent interview with PointCentral with Sean Miller, and we're also going to be talking, of course, about Properly. So that should give you a bit of a flavour of what we're going to be talking about in today's session. So let's get cracking. I'm going to start with Jim, because I'm very interested. You provide short and long-term residential property managers with these enterprise class connected property solutions. In what sort of problems are property managers trying to solve when they reach out to you? And what are the key concerns and priorities that you're coming across?
That's a great question, Paul. I think, a lot of different things, but if I had to, give you a few of the top reasons why they reach out to us, I think it's around a combination of improving the guest experience. They realize that the industry is booming, and they realize that guests want more of that hotel-like experience, and they reach out because they are looking for ways that they can make that guest experience better. So, for example, we know from data that guests want to start their vacation. They, maybe have kids in the car with the dog barking in the back, and they really don't want to go to the office and pick up keys, wait in line, signing documents, and then drive another 20 minutes to the unit up the mountain to get to their cabin, if you will. So guests want that seamless experience, very similar to if you go to a hotel today with a digital key, right? So they want to go directly to that unit. They want to start their vacation right away. And that's what we do. We help property managers enable that type of guest experience with keyless access, et cetera. We also hear property managers are very busy. Here in the US today, it's very difficult for them to find labor and quality labor. So therefore, they're looking for ways to increase the operational efficiency of their business. And, if you're, talking about keys as an example, property managers dealing with keys is kind of a nightmare for them. It costs them a lot of money, and we talk to them and help them think about what are they really spending managing keys for 100 or 200 or 300 units and rekeying, and how many customers lost the keys at the beach after a day out partying. running out to bring new keys to people. So it's a lot of time, it's a lot of money, and just managing keys alone is very inefficient. And they're looking for ways to improve that experience. And then lastly, I would just say that some are also very concerned about safety and security. They realize that their guests are concerned about that. Actually, there was a 2019 Focusrite survey done, and it looked at all travelers in the United States. And of those travelers, why did the guests that looked at a short-term rental choose a hotel over a short-term rental? And a large percentage from that graph had to do with safety and security. People concerned about their safety and security being in someone else's home. And I just believe, that we in this industry should not be dealing with keys any longer. And, people love these features and they want more of them.
You mentioned there about safety and security, and I know you're also keen to emphasize how you help property managers, reassure guests that, you're looking out for their wallet as well. So how would you say you go about doing that at PointCentral?
What we do is, we have integrations with most of the property management software. So when that guest books a few days at a unit, for example, through that integration, they receive their welcome email with their reservation confirmation and their door code that gives them access to that door. So the guest right away is aware that they're not dealing with keys. They don't have to worry about who had a key to this a week ago before I got here, worried about being in there at night or alone in a remote location. And they're aware that they have a secure home that only they have access to, and property managers market that, the ones that do the smart access, market that to guests. And that's how guests are aware that this is something that they're very happy that they have.
And of course, this segment of the webinar, we're discussing how the professionalization of software is actually enhancing the customer journey. So Alex, I know from our discussion previously that from a property manager's perspective, that there are two customers, and this refers to the guest and the owner. So how do you think we go about addressing the needs of the owner with actually a more professional process from now on?
It's an excellent question. I think we often make the mistake when we think about property managers of just thinking of one set of customers for them, which is obviously the guest, and that's the one that's sort of clear on everyone's mind. Just as important as a guest, as a customer, for a property manager is the owner. So our set of solutions is almost exclusively or primarily addressed to owners. I think the professionalization of the industry is really, that's the Wild West, that's the frontier, as in we've got about 50% of all properties that are managed by owners. Now, you can address that in two ways. Number one, you have to teach the owners to become more professional about what they do. And that's a really difficult task. I mean, as Airbnb and many other platforms have experienced, because you're dealing with millions and millions of people who do things differently, who often have very little experience at this because they just bought a property or they just started with it. So how do you scalably communicate the skills, the certifications, the best practices to them that they need to operate their business and manage the cleaner that is at the front line? The second part, and I think that's just as interesting a component, is how do you help the property manager engage with the owner? So sort of because of our focus on owners, it's that second part that we focus on when we engage with property managers. I think there's an interesting, I mean, you sitting in London and quite a few of us here sitting in the US, there's a very interesting strange disparity between Europe and the US. Property managers in the US are almost exclusively focused on full service, meaning there is really no hybrid model. I think the only real hybrid model is Evolve, which basically allows a property manager not to deal with on-site operations, but just to deal with the marketing of the property. In Europe, that's much more mixed. Almost the majority of property managers actually just market properties. They don't operate the property day by day. So from a property manager's perspective, particularly in the US, I think a big part of the question is, how do I manage an owner through the customer journey, so to speak? Assuming that that owner doesn't necessarily just immediately come in as a full service customer, but may come in a different shape. as in they may just buy a basic DIY piece of software that eases them into the property management process. Then the next step might be that they may require some services from a property manager, such as maybe housekeeping services or marketing services, but they want them unbundled. They don't want to buy the whole package. And then slowly, sort of as their needs grow over time, and as they like early exuberance of being able to do everything themselves, you know, sort of as that resolve lessens over time, you can start easing them into selling them more services. So basically, our approach to this is the 50% of the industry that is owner managed, that's the big opportunity. And how do we enable, first of all, the owners to manage themselves and do so professionally, do so to sort of global set of standards and in a compliant way? And how do we help property managers to ease owners into the property management process, not with a one-size-fits-all, it's basically either full service or nothing, but rather with a nuanced product where you can bring them into the door with maybe just a piece of easy software, then sort of lead them on by offering bits and pieces of the property management process and service to them until you get them into a full service customer. I think that's by far the most difficult part of the industry to solve. That's what the listing platforms, of course, are struggling with. As regulatory requirements have gone up, and as we'll very, very soon will face an onslaught of regulatory pushes from the hotel industry, that obviously is keenly aware that the pie has just shrunk for everyone, as in with tourism under assault. The hotels that are seeing the sort of the flip side of what's been a huge boost to our industry, like I think we should all assume that there's going to be a big push on the hotel side to hold vacation rentals accountable, to make sure that vacation rentals, whether they're owner operated or property manager operated, comply with the same set of standards that hotels have to comply with. And as that happens, you know, sort of as an industry, we have to make sure everybody has the tools to do that. If we don't regulate ourselves, we will be regulated. And I think the former option is much better than the latter.
Thank you, Alex. And I'll turn to Marcus. I think Alex has done a great job there of defining this, and in a difficult job of defining the customer journey from an owner's perspective. But you at Hostaway, you've got a strong focus, particularly on the growing property managers, and you've talked already about reaching this milestone of over 100 integrations. So how can you ensure that your customers can actually grow with this software that you're talking about?
Good question. Good question. First of all, what's happening right now is that everything is becoming more professional, not only in terms of the operational side, but also in terms of the financial side. So what we've seen already over the years is the VCs are investing in property managers. There's acquisitions taking place. Last year, lots of action in that field. Many companies going out of business, and many new ones suddenly gaining overnight success. There's also a lot of large capital entering the space. I'll get to that a bit later on. But basically, as a property manager, I think the only future you can have where you keep managing the same properties is if you own them, because the value of your assets or your company will be in the actual real estate. But if you're managing other people's properties and you don't intend to grow, you're gonna have churn. I'll get to that soon, why that's going to happen. But a common reason why our customers lose a property is that the owner of the property sold the property. And another reason why a lot of property managers are struggling with expansion is that they don't have time to focus on their own vision. What are they really going for? And of course, aiming for something is one thing, but actually getting there is another, the execution part. And in order to get to that kind of thinking, to actually redefine your vision over and over again, you have to be clear of the operational struggles, and especially those tend to come when you grow. You know, if you're doing the same work day in, day out, you usually don't have to struggle. But if your business doubles overnight, or if your number of employees grows overnight, or your number of bookings grows overnight, suddenly that's when you struggle. And that's when we step in, because we see that, and we help the property managers reconfigure the way they do things. And surprisingly, quite often it's not even related to software. It's about how you do things. Because something that entrepreneurs, and this goes for all industries and even big companies, sometimes they just forget to look around and see, well, how is everyone else doing it? You know, every problem that a company has, there's 10,000 other companies that had that same problem, and 9,000 out of them solved it in one particular way. But if you don't have the time to recognize that you have the problem in the first place, you're certainly not going to find the solution. And that's exactly what we do. We help the property managers identify the bottlenecks, and then quite often it can be solved by software. We help them reconfigure it to work in new ways. But most importantly, it's about the people who are working there. So we provide live training and give advice. We provide webinars and education and one-on-one sessions even with the founders.
And we've already alluded to that M&A activity in the context a bit earlier, but how would you imagine this is actually going to drive up the expectations for property managers now?
The expectations of property managers should be that they are going to see, on one hand, if they hold the good properties, and first of all, there's a great future, a really bright future for every single person in this industry right now, because the travel industry is driven by consumers, and there's 7 billion of them on this planet. I think 7.2. And when even a small shift happens, then that's a massive amount of people that might do, 10 trips, but one trip is different. It means there's a huge amount of money being shifted. And what we saw last year was that huge amount of money was being shifted from big cities with tiny hotel rooms into mountains, lakes, beaches, ocean, golf courses, wineries, and they were shifted from small hotel rooms into big properties where you can stay with your family and your friends. So anyone in the vacation rental industry, that's a shift that even if we reverted, even if we said, no, we're not going to travel with our family ever again. It was terrible. The villa by the sea, it had a pool, that was nice, but no, we're gonna go to Manhattan and sit in a 10 square foot room instead, because that's really what we want to do. Even if some people go back to that, it's going to take a long time. So the demand will be there. However, what property managers need to also acknowledge is that everyone's eyes are on you right now. That includes the owners. You need to perform. You need to produce the revenues, and you need to remove the hassle from managing the property. And you can do that by using automation. I think Alex had many good points there. But in addition to that, you have to keep in mind what's going on with the owner. Why would an owner sell? Well, most likely it has to do with money. Now, why is that happening? Could it be perhaps that the revenues from this property, or the value, the intrinsic value of the real estate itself, has gone so much up that the property owner doesn't think there's more upside, and they choose to sell it? That's the property manager's job. They need to go out to the owners and tell them exactly what to expect next year, what to expect 5 years from now. Because if they don't, there's going to be big companies, private equity, real estate investment trusts. They are going to come in, they are going to buy those properties. And for the individual property manager, that means that they will no longer be managing them. Because if you buy up, let's say, 10,000 vacation homes and you manage them in a fund, you're not going to hire individual property managers for that. Maybe you won't even have a property manager. But one thing's for sure is that the whole industry is consolidating right now.
And that links in nicely to my next question to Kelsey at Breezeway, because we're talking here about professionalization of software, but what exactly does this mean for this ecosystem of purpose-built tools and types of solutions that you're providing for property managers at Breezeway?
Yeah. So for us, I think, or from my perspective, the technology ecosystem is growing, it's expanding. And what that means for managers is they're having to look at all of these solutions out there and ultimately build essentially a tech stack that works well for them. So the more tools that managers can choose from, and the more educated managers are on how that tech can help, means that they have more buying power. But it doesn't mean that there is just one solution. There's, the reality is that there are a number of things managers are looking to solve for. They have a number of different roles, and they need either, you know, a specialist or a specialized software to be able to solve for a lot of those different roles. And it's hard to choose from this wide scope of technologies that is out there right now. You know, and on top of that, they need all of these technologies to be integrated with one another. So if you look at what a property management company has as far as roles, they have a housekeeping manager who needs visibility into what the field team is doing. They need a reservations team that needs to know what's available and what's clean and ready to book. And they have a marketing team who needs to ensure the inquiries are being converted to bookings and repeat guests are coming back. And so there's so many different roles that need to be solved for that can be solved for with technology. And with Breezeway, we did a property operations survey this year, and we actually found that 53% of managers were using 4 or more software solutions in order to run their business. And so building that tech stack is critical to running a successful vacation rental business. We saw this last year, particularly, you know, at the height of the pandemic, when many companies, you know, due to travel restrictions, had some time to reevaluate what they were doing. And so they decided to make a number of changes with their software, or reevaluate what their software did and how they might be able to better utilize it. But right now, I think that, you know, enterprising managers are working to automate their processes to boost their brand and gain that competitive edge as more, you know, individual homeowners come to the space, as Alex talked about, and how additional managers enter that space as well in order to differentiate themselves. And we found with the same survey, 88% of managers will continue to differentiate themselves with that software. So I think that's kind of where we see, you know, all of these specific tools coming in. Even if those are kind of being rolled up by larger companies, they're still out there and available, and managers need to understand how they can all work together. As Marcus talked about the Hostaway marketplace, I think that's a great solution. How can everything kind of come together so that they can use what's best for their business and company, since everybody runs just a little bit differently.
And you beat me to mentioning your property operations report as well. Has your relationship, the way you deal with property managers, has it changed throughout the pandemic? Are you maybe before was it more selling, but you know, how would you say is it more of a consultancy now for them?
Yeah, I think my specific role, I don't think has necessarily changed, in that I'm very passionate about being more of a consultant and a partner. You know, even if you're onboarding a specific type of software, you're not just going to get questions about that software. You know, we as the implementation team are working with so many managers and understanding how they're utilizing it. And as Marcus mentioned, you know, you don't have everyone is sharing in a lot of the same pain points. And so you're understanding and learning from managers about how they're doing things. And so not only are you onboarding a particular type of software, but you're also understanding how that manager functions and how they're running their business, and understanding their tips and kind of tools of the trade. So it's really important for us, I think, from the consultant perspective, in that you're not just onboarding a software and saying, I'm going to fit this software into my business. It's more of a conversation. You have an expert of the technology on one side, you have an expert of the business on the other, trying to understand how that software works. And you're partnering together to ensure that that software is going to work best for you. And specifically in identifying those pain points, how can I solve for those pain points? And then almost anything after that is kind of just bonus. So I think that it's more than just the personal touch. It's understanding how the software works. It's ensuring that the company that you're working for understands, you know, how your business functions, questions going back to that company. And, you know, when vacation rental managers get more value from their software, there's a lot of other things that happen that shines through, from an easier booking process, you know, a better check-in experience, as Jim alluded to, and then better maintained rental and more service throughout the stay. So it truly trickles down all the way to that guest experience, and ultimately to the owner as well, because they have more bookings, the property is better cared for, and they're, you know, it's of higher quality.
Kelsey, and I am going to turn to Jim next, actually, because how would Jim, with PointCentral, how would you say, how can smart home actually improve the guest experience? And actually, I guess, you know, we're here for this webinar from a short-term rental perspective. So how is it going to encourage travelers to pick vacation rentals over hotels?
I would say that, you know, we know from data that guests today, especially the 18 to 34-year-old demo, really love smart home. And we also know from data like the Focusrite survey that guests, short-term rental guests, expect that the hotel-like amenities. So smart home provides that for them, right? As we talked about earlier, the digital check-in, the pre-cooling of the room when they arrive, right? So with the integration that we provide with their PMS software, we know when they're due to arrive. If the unit's been vacant for the previous week, the system knows it's vacant and can rate, let's say, and can go into energy saving mode. But then an hour or two prior to the guest arriving, that unit is chilled so that they have a warm, comfortable experience. The ability to use integration to control devices with Alexa, for example, are just some, or smart lighting. If we know a guest is arriving and it's, the sun is not out, being able to have lights that will guide the guest safely to the door is another example of a way that guests want these smart home features. They expect them, and if you want repeat customers to these locations, you have that guests are more inclined to want to come back.
Thank you, Jim. I want to kind of move on to how we've seen a lot of, we've already touched on it, but this injection now of the venture capital coming into it. So Marcus, I know you've got some particularly good opinions on this, and you mentioned that the barrier of entry for venture capital isn't really going down at the moment. So what does this mean for the OTAs who want more properties, but obviously you've got less inventory nowadays?
Yeah, first of all, I think venture capital has that's a bit old school, maybe 2019, 2020, because venture capital basically takes other people's money, not their own money, but other people's money, and invest it in companies that they pretty much either expect to go bankrupt or become 100 times more valuable. Unfortunately, though, they're currently losing out because there's another group of investors called private equity. I think Warren Buffett is a good example of this. There's two ways to win on the stock market. One of them is to have information, and the other one is to have a lot of money. Now, Warren Buffett happens to have both, but of course, the stock market is regulated. You can't use insider information. However, it's worth noting that on the real estate side, there is no regulation. Almost no country, actually, let me rephrase. No country that I've seen has any limitation on insider information when it comes to real estate transactions. And this is what I find truly fascinating. What it means is that if you have the money, and that's what private equity has, they wouldn't invest 50 million. They would invest 10 billion. If you have the money and you have the information, there are no laws preventing you from just owning everything. And I can give two recent examples of this. One of them is a private equity firm called Thoma Brava. They have, in the last 2 months, they bought 3 companies. Now, one of them is called RealPage, which manages real estate transactions. But in our space, they own a PMS and channel manager called Kigo. Now, yesterday, they announced they paid another 5 billion for a data company. Now, you may just wonder, are they going to start buying properties? I mean, why are they making these acquisitions? Why would they pay 5 or 10 billion for a company? Because the revenues are certainly not what's driving the valuation of these companies. It's the data. And who's providing the data? Well, that's our industry. And same thing goes for Inhabit IQ, which owns companies like Blue Tent, Library, Streamline. You know, Goldman Sachs doesn't mess around with tiny pocket change, 100 million there for some VC investment, but they invested into Inhabit IQ. Now, what does Goldman Sachs know well? They know 2 things. They know money and real estate. And that's what I was referring to when I mentioned earlier there, that property managers need to take good care of the owners, because you don't want the owners to sell. Because when Goldman Sachs steps in with the billions, or some private equity company that you never heard about steps in with billions as well, and they have the data that you don't have, that's when you're going to face a problem. And in order to prevent that, you need to make sure that you maintain a good connection with the owners. Now, what it means for the space is, it's interesting to hear that some of you brought up safety, but nobody really talks about privacy in this industry right now. When you're using a product, what happens with the data? Who is that data valuable for? And actually, I'm mentioning this because at Hostaway, privacy is a huge thing for us. We really value our users' privacy, and we for example, haven't partnered with a single data provider in the industry. So a property manager with Hostaway can be 100% sure that we're not going to sell that data so that it can be used to put them out of business. But if you're a property manager out there and you didn't realize that you're actually working with Goldman Sachs or Thoma Brava, then I recommend you read the privacy terms. It's probably 200 pages, but try to figure out, is your data being used against you? Is your data being given up to your competitors who can buy you out or put you out of business? Because if that's the case, you may want to reconsider how important privacy is.
Well, let's get a bit of a VC perspective on that, because Alex, I know you used to be previously being a VC investor with a focus on marketplace software as a service. So what do you think VCs should be looking for right now, the type of business models that they would be investing in?
Yeah, thank you for the question, and also Marcus, congratulations. That was an excellent summary of what's going on in our industry, and one of the most thoughtful ones I've heard in a long time. I think if I can just comment a few things on what Marcus said, I think it's absolutely right that we're seeing a shift in our industry from venture capital to private equity. The industry right now is incredibly hot. I'm old enough that I've seen this a few times before, and unfortunately after an industry that's incredibly hot, something else comes, and we're not going to talk about that right now, but basically that I think the message to everyone is take the money while it's there quickly and hope it's going to last. In terms of the business model and what VCs should be looking for, both private equity, actually VC and private equity have two different objectives. VCs are maniacally focused on one thing, and that's growth. VCs want to make sure the companies that they invest in to grow as quickly as possible. Profit, EBITDA is a secondary consideration. It's all about growth, and it's about building winners and category-leading companies. And of course, the big event for VCs is Airbnb. VCs are masters at pattern recognition. They don't admit to it, but basically after something works, everybody else is trying to find the other thing that looks just like it and hopefully works just as well. So, VCs as a group are sort of first and foremost looking at how do we build the next Airbnb. And in the tech space, they're looking at sort of what's happening in the ecosystem now that, from their perspective, Airbnb is the only thing that matters. Sort of now that Airbnb has happened, sort of how do we monetize the ecosystem? What's the next set of opportunities? Private equity is a little bit different. Private equity ultimately works with leverage, works with debt, meaning they have to focus on EBITDA. So they actually have to build profitable companies. They have to grow EBITDA much more aggressively. But private equity has sort of shifted a little bit too, as in there's a big growth focus in private equity too. And if I sort of look at the big private equity transactions recently, they're both about building EBITDA. But a lot of that is about essentially consolidation of the market and trying to find industry leaders. I'm sort of thinking about what's happening around Vacasa, basically funding the acquisition or consolidation of the property management space. And how do we build category leaders? I think the interesting opportunity for all of us and the challenge for investors is because they're masters at pattern recognition, they tend to oversimplify things a little bit. So the model that has worked in the industry is the Airbnb model, as in stay away from the difficult stuff, stay away from operations, stay away from anything that's non-scalable. Just focus on building a brand and then making it as simple as possible to sort of do the one thing that's important, which is getting heads into beds, as in basically managing the relationship between guest and owner, making sure the owners get the guests, making sure the guests find accommodation, and then leave everything else out. I think obviously property managers live in a very different world, live in a world that today is fundamentally not scalable. And I think that's the sort of big oversight. Vacasa, as it is today, is not a scalable business. It's a business of basically building local operations city by city, replicating the same thing all over again. And sort of when you reach scale in Fort Lauderdale, that doesn't do anything for you in Miami or in Helsinki or in Genoa or in Milan. So you're rebuilding the same things. I think what they're starting to look at right now is how can they actually turn that business model into something that is much more scalable. And sort of I mentioned it early on, the models that we've seen in Europe tend to be more scalable for historical reasons, because Europe is a market where destination and source are two different things, as in, your source might be the Netherlands, your destination is going to be Portugal, Greece, Italy, all over the place. So property managers look very different because you have a source that's different from a destination. As a result, it's much harder to build local operations in all the destination markets. So you come on with you basically had to develop a unbundled model where property operations are done by someone other than who does the marketing. And that then ends up looking a lot more like Airbnb. So, the European large property managers tend to be larger than the American counterparts. I'm talking about the Sykes of the world and the Interhomes, the Interchalets, Aways, because they're unbundled, because they focus on marketing. I think what we'll see in the market is a lot of this massive amount of capital that Marcus talked about, that's sitting on the sidelines, that wants to invest into the space, that wants to write $100, $500 million checks, not $5, $10 million checks, which is more VC investments. They're going to look for scale players to invest into that start looking more like Airbnb, that focus more on the unbundled component. And of course, tech is the big enabler. I very much agree with Marcus that sort of as data comes to the forefront, a lot of this business is about data. Privacy is becoming a big issue. We've spent years, or more than a year, dealing with GDPR compliance, which used to be a uniquely European problem. I think what is catching many by surprise is that what California now has is actually stricter than GDPR. So it's becoming an American problem too. I recently talked to one of the authors of the California legislation, which in many ways is stricter than GDPR. So sort of thinking about how data empowers a business, but from a property manager's perspective, thinking about how you actually stay compliant and what you can and what you cannot do, I think Marcus is absolutely right, is becoming a key issue and is becoming a key enabler of business models. Like ultimately all of this is empowered, enabled by data. And we need to start thinking about what are the scalable parts of the business, what are the non-scalable parts of the business, and how do we build competitive advantage around those.
Thank you, Alex. And Kelsey, you've been listening in there. From your perspective, are property managers actually now maybe demanding more from their software? Are they better at maybe defining what they want? And if so, why would that be the case?
Absolutely. I think they're demanding more. I think it comes with just time, right? As trial and error, other softwares, of course, you're going to know exactly what you need and what pain points you're looking to address. But I think a lot of that is also coming from the guests and owners who are demanding more. That's putting more pressure on managers to remove manual layers and redundancies of their job and deliver a higher quality product and service. As we know, property managers are, they have the balance of both clients. They have the homeowners and being able to provide an individualized homeowner experience with their needs and their requests, and ensuring the property is well cared for, while at the same time they're balancing, this personalized and unique guest experience. So it's a lot to balance the two. And so I think that when it comes to having two clients and then a number of softwares to choose from, and understanding and knowing now that the all-in-one solution doesn't technically, exist, that ultimately kind of leads to a little bit of decision fatigue on the manager's side. So they're demanding a lot more when they're going through that sales process. They're vetting it a lot longer. They're understanding, okay, is this going to solve the specific need that I have or the specific pain point? And they're outwardly asking those questions. And I think also in this industry, as it seems like it's growing, but it is fairly, it's relatively small, I think, in comparison to some of the other industries out there, which I know is a little bit general, but a lot of managers rely on their peers and speaking with others in the industry who have onboarded other software. And so word of mouth now is very important when it comes to understanding how a particular software will function. And that's even before they get to the sales process. So I think in other words, you know, they need a reliable software to deliver on their brand promise. I've worked with, you know, a property management company that we didn't fully utilize even the, you know, the few softwares that we were using. And I think that there was a lot of potential for us to use those more, to onboard other software, but we just didn't do it. And what ended up happening is we would default to manual processes and, you know, regular texting and communication. And I don't think, looking back, we would have been able to take on this additional service that guests and owners are now requiring. And so ensuring that you have the foundation of good tech in order to be able to better manage and communicate with guests and owners is really, really important. And so that's why managers are requiring more of their software, which I think is expected.
I think that ties in with Marcus, what we were talking about before, as this rate of adoption is getting higher now. What sort of foundations do businesses have to have in place for when this happens?
That's a good question. I think a lot of businesses, even successful ones, I think Airbnb is a pretty good example. I was recently actually reading their IPO filings again, because they're quite fascinating. Now, when you see the IPO filings, they say from the start that they had a clear vision and they were just going for it. But that's not reality. Reality is that they didn't have a clue what they were doing back then when they started. They did something and they thought it was cool, and then they tried something a bit different, and then it moved on. And that's what a lot of entrepreneurs do. If you're starting out right now managing properties, and right now is a great start, and you have some connections, or you have some knowledge. Maybe you know that that a certain beach is very popular. That's probably all the knowledge you need. You don't need to have everything figured out, because whatever plans you make, whatever you put to your business plan, which most people don't have anyway, but if you do have one, all of that data will be old in about 2 years. What you do need is, however, a solid vision. You need to know what it is you're going for. You need to set your goals very high. So you need to know, why are you doing this? Because right now it's fun. Like Alex said, it's a hot market, and it's fun when you can just do something and you get good results. But just remember, last April wasn't a really nice time. And you need to be prepared for that. Many big companies like Stay Alfred were not prepared for that. And that's when you really need to decide, what is it that you're working for? And how do you define success? What are your goals? And what are you willing to sacrifice to get there? Once you know the answers to those questions, and I know those are way harder than the typical questions a property manager get asked. For example, how do you manage cleanings? How do you ensure the safety of the guest? How do you ensure that the property is well maintained? How do you ensure that you have enough bookings? How do you set the rates? Those are important questions too. But I think those questions, they're a derivative of the other ones. If you know where you're going, you're going to find the way there. But if you start by just looking at a map without even knowing where you're going, well, you're not going to get there. It's that simple. No matter how good the map is, you're not going to get there. So when I mentioned previously that we partner with only certain property managers, that's actually what we ask them. You know, what is your vision? What are your goals? And if we see that they have clear goals, that's the first requirement, that they know what they want in life or in their business. Then we have only one more requirement. Are those goals something that we can help with? And that's what we at Hostaway do. And a lot of property managers today, they know actually what they want, because they are way more professional than they were five years ago. And we also see that they have a very good path of getting there.
Thank you, Marcus. I'll switch back to Jim, because how would you say that you know, the smart home is actually going to be able to improve the relationship between the property manager and the owner? I don't think it's something we've discussed too much so far.
That's you know, the relationship between the property manager and the owner. Someone mentioned earlier, that's a difficult one, right? So what we find is the owner looks at smart home and wonders, is smart home going to help me, or is it going to, this is really something that is going to help the property manager make more money, become more efficient, et cetera. And frequently the property manager asks the owner to pay for the devices, if you will, and the property manager pays for the monthly software charge. So what we do is we provide a lot of marketing material to the property manager, who in turn really has to sell smart home to the owner, because we don't get direct access to those owners. So by providing that marketing material, I think, and letters and email introductions and so on, I think it's been pretty clear to the owners how smart home benefits them. How they can make more money by having more bookings if people want to return to their property, how smart home can protect the assets in their home. As a small example, just having a water detection device in the home, and the property manager would know if there was a washing machine leak, et cetera, could destroy that property. They quickly start to understand the benefit there. Or energy consumption is a big one as well, right? A guest walks into a beach house. What do, right? They walk in, they drop the air condition down to 60 degrees Fahrenheit. They open the sliding glass door to look at the beautiful beach, and the air conditioning system's being abused, the energy is being wasted, et cetera. And the owners can see through the use of smart thermostats and contact door sensors how rules can be set up to control high and low temperature limits and save them sometimes 25% on energy use. So, and then when they see the energy use and they look at the cost, they quickly calculate that ROI and realize that it's a win-win for everybody.
Could you sort of outline what you are doing at PointCentral to continue to evolve your software as this industry professionalizes?
Well, we're focused right now on the property managers that we serve, but it's constantly evolving. And what we're doing is we're focusing on additional integrations with other companies out there. Some of them are on the call with us now, like Breezeway, because we find that these property managers they don't want to jump around to different platforms and make their life complicated. They like to stay in their PMS software, and they want the other softwares to be integrated with them to make their life easier. So we will continue to integrate with different devices and continue to integrate with other companies and different property management softwares, and of course improve our software as well, which we hear from property managers frequently. Someone mentioned earlier, I think it was Kelsey, that these property managers talk to each other. They're becoming more professional. They know more of what they want, and they're more vocal to us with the things that they want and how they want their software to work. And we're constantly prioritizing those requests and enhancing our software to make sure that we deliver on what property managers are asking for. So continuous improvement is really the name of the game for us.
Thank you, Jim. And a similar question really to Kelsey. How do you see from the work you're doing working with clients at Breezeway, how do you see the future of software in the short-term rental space developing? What sort of things would you focus on?
Yeah. I think it's a really, really good question. I truly think that it lies, the root in being able to develop your brand promise is all in communication. So very similar to what Jim mentioned with, communication, whether that did be to guests or to homeowners. One thing that came, from the pandemic is that managers are getting a lot of questions about things that weren't necessarily questioned before. So for example, the back of house operations, I used to, I would show up to a vacation rental, it's clean, great. I didn't think about 6 hours prior to that, there was someone else in my rental, and what happened between their departure at 10 a.m. and my arrival at 4 p.m. And so that has really put a big emphasis on the back of house operations, automating that, making sure that that is clear, that you can specify your processes and make sure that all of your staff is, following that. You have your staff driving around to all of these different properties and you don't have a ton of visibility into exactly what's going on. You're training them, but then you want to be able to ensure that that was done correctly. And I think that where the future is going is providing tools to be able to communicate what those back of house operations will do. And I think that's really incredible because managers do so much. I don't think it's often talked about outside of, or spoken about with guests. They are doing so very much at all of these properties. And so being able to communicate what they're doing and doing so with the guests, this is how we're cleaning your property. They're asking about what surfaces are being disinfected. What are you doing with, the comforter and things like that. All things managers have been doing for such a long time. They're not necessarily, of course, with PPE and all that came from the pandemic, they're changing their processes that way, but they're still cleaning the property to a very high standard. They're still delivering, those amenities and maintaining that quality. And so I think now, software is moving in a direction of, okay, well, I need to communicate that to guests on top of homeowners. The emphasis was always on how do I communicate to homeowners, because homeowners are coming back to me and asking, what is the program that I'm in? What is it offering to me? Especially when those barriers to entry were broken down with the, surgence of Airbnb. I can go in and list my property online. Why wouldn't I do that? Why would I work with a professional manager? And it's for, all of these reasons. Here are all the times I visited the property. Here are the things that I billed you for or didn't bill you for. And that communication is incredibly important for not only maintaining existing homeowners, but also bringing on new ones. So now that guests are asking about it, it's a whole other, side of it, which is here's what we've cleaned. Cleanliness came hand in hand with safety over the last year, and I think it will continue to do so. We saw with the property operations survey that we held that 71% of rental managers think that these high guest expectations for cleaning standards will remain, and that guests are still more sensitive to the proper property preparation than they were pre-pandemic. So I don't think that is going anywhere, and I think that having tools to be able to communicate that will be the way that it's the way the software is going. And on top of that, I think it was an Airbnb report that identified that why 2025 75% of travelers will be the millennial or younger generations, and that particular cohort holds a higher standard for service and convenience. So we're seeing it in the conference that Breezeway held back in March, Elevate. We heard from Altito and the way that they were, offering these additional services to guests, such as, stocking the fridge before they arrive, grocery provisioning, all the way to, I need to be able to help them get their luggage from the top floor of the building to the bottom. So those types of services that really elevate the quality, deliver on that brand promise, and then also communicate that we're taking it beyond just you're showing up to a clean rental. We're providing these additional services during the stay. And I think it's one thing to say, we're just going to start, allowing for these additional services to be offered to guests. It's another to act upon them. So not only to market them, make them available on your website, but also to ensure that your employees are aware of these new services. You have the tools and technology to be able to support those additional services. And we know, I think, in general, when a customer feels satisfied, that they exhibit, more loyalty, so they're returning year after year to stay with that particular manager. We know repeat guests are great, hang on to. They might spend more, so they might purchase additional services, and all that does is it creates conditions that ultimately will lower operational costs and maintain a higher employee satisfaction, higher level employee engagement. And we all know that's because happy guests are a little bit easier to manage. So I think all of that kind of ties in. I think that's really where software is going.
Thank you very much, Kelsey. I did want to sort of touch a little bit on data privacy, but I think we've had such a good conversation that I've completely run out of time at the end. So I do apologise to our speakers for that. A fantastic conversation, and a big thank you again to all of our speakers, to Jane, to Jim, to Alex, to Kelsey, and to Marcus. We've got a couple more slides just to show you just before we finish things up. So we're actually taking a summer break from Rockstar's webinars, but we will be back in September for a session on digital trust and safety. Combating the Evolving Complexities of Travel Payment Fraud on Tuesday, the 21st of September, 4 p.m. BST. Good that Nick joined us at the opening part of this webinar, because Flywire are going to be represented on that panel in September. And the details are in the chat for you now. We're really looking forward to our inaugural Urban Living Festival, taking place in person, live in London at Tobacco Dock on the 26th and 27th of October 2021. You can check out more information in the chat provided. Now, we've got a short video showing a little bit about what we've been working on over our webinars over the last year. So check this out very quickly.
Hello.
Good afternoon.
Hello.
Good afternoon.
Well, good afternoon.
Hello, everybody.
And welcome to the Trailblazer
Service Department News,
Rockstars,
Urban Living Light,
Engage,
Urban Living webinar series.
I think you have to tell the right story to the right people via the right people is really, really key, in the right place.
Because we are all in the same, in the same boat. We want to make this work.
When you take away that personal contact, it's a problem.
Through the concept development, through the architecture, through the design, through the experience.
So although it's a growing sector, there's still huge scope for it to evolve even further.
Thank you very much for checking out that short video showing what we've been up to a bit over the last year. For sponsorship opportunities regarding any of those events and our services, please do get in touch with my colleague Katie, and her details are on screen for you now. A big thank you again to our series sponsor Flywire and session sponsor PointCentral. Huge thanks for all your support for these sessions. Feel free to contact us via our various channels. And we're just about to actually have we've got a 2-minute countdown. So you can get in touch with our speakers through this before we close off the Zoom. Elizabeth Griffin, I can see that you've raised your hand. So we've got 2 minutes left where you can discuss anything you want with our panel before we close things off. But yes, thank you again for listening, everyone. And we'll see you again soon. Thank you very much for tuning in.